If you're training for speed, strength, or power, do not do static stretching prior to weight training because it will negatively impact your performance and it will also greatly increase your chance of injury. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be debunking the myth that you need to stretch before working out. But before I start, you guys know the drill. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, ding ding ding. And if you don't want to watch the entire video, I will be including timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead to the section that you want. Now, onto the topic at hand. A lot of people are under this false impression that you need to stretch before working out and that it is somehow going to benefit you. And of all of the myths that I have debunked over the last several weeks, this is the most widely accepted and widely believed myth that I have covered. I myself, when I first started out, I believed this myth and I used to always stretch prior to working out until about 11 years ago when I had an injury, and then I ended up realizing how bad it was. I'll get into that a little bit later, but first I want to explain why exactly you shouldn't be stretching prior to working out. When it comes to stretching, and in particular static stretching prior to weight training, it will negatively affect your performance and it could also lead to injury. And one of the reasons why it could lead to injury is because when you stretch, it is going to change the elasticity of the tendon. And in doing so, this will have a negative impact on your speed, your power, and your strength. So if you are training for either speed, strength, or power, you should not be doing static stretching prior to working out because it is going to negatively affect your performance. In fact, there was a study done and they had a group of people. One group had done static stretching prior to training. The other group did not stretch whatsoever prior to training. And what they found was when it came to strength, the group that had done static stretching prior to training, their 1 repetition maximum had actually decreased by 8.36%. Now, some of you may see this and think, well, 8.36%, that's not really a huge detriment in terms of how much you are losing. But if you are trying to achieve either a world record or you are very high level, that 8.36% is going to be huge. And even if you're not trying to break any world record, if you're just training just for the sake of training, if you want to get stronger, then static stretching prior to weight training is going to be counterproductive to your goal of getting stronger. So if your goal is speed, strength, or power, then you should not be doing static stretching prior to training. Another thing that this study found was that the group of people that had performed static stretching prior to their training, what they found was that their lower body stability had actually decreased by 22.68%. That's not a mistake, 22.68%. So if your goal is speed, strength, power, or if you are trying to improve stability, then static stretching prior to training is not going to be beneficial. One of the reasons I mentioned earlier about how static stretching is going to change the elasticity of the tendon, and if I were to break this down as simple as possible, basically tendons are going to store mechanical work as elastic energy during eccentric contractions. And the stiffer the tendon, then the faster the force is going to be transferred from the bone and the more efficient the concentric contraction, so the lifting phase, is going to be. And you can think of it as a spring coil. So if you remember a few videos in my program design series, I was talking about eccentric work and also elastic energy. And your muscle tendon is going to store elastic energy during the eccentric contraction. So you can think of your muscle as a spring coil. If you put a lot of tension on the muscle, there's going to be a rebound effect during the concentric contraction, and that's going to allow you to generate more force and explode up during the concentric movement. Now, one of the things with regard to the spring coil, if you have a spring that is constantly being stretched out, eventually that spring is going to lose its springiness. So you could think of the muscle tendon that way. The more you stretch the muscle tendon, the less elasticity you are going to have in the tendon, and because there's going to be less elasticity, you're not going to be able to generate as much force. You could think of even an elastic band. If you were to take an elastic band and fling it, it would go pretty far. If you keep doing that over and over and over again, what's going to happen is as the elastic band loses its elasticity, pulling the band the same amount is not going to project it the same amount of distance, because as it loses its elasticity, you're going to have to pull it even further to get the same distance. And your muscle tendons are no different. If you constantly stretch them, they lose their elasticity, and then you're going to lose a lot of your force production from your muscle tendon. And using that analogy of the elastic band, then this could also explain why exactly static stretching prior to weight training can increase chance of injury, because with the analogy of the elastic band, if you keep pulling an elastic band, what's going to happen is it loses its elasticity and eventually it is going to snap. Well, your muscles are no different. The way that stretching works is when you stretch the muscle, that stretching is going to cause muscle damage by creating micro tears in the muscle belly. And I'm going to use myself as an example because I actually got into an injury about 11 years ago. Back in February, I believe it was February 4th, 2009, I ended up tearing my pec. And at that time, back in 2009, I was also also under the belief that you had to stretch prior to weight training. So I always used to stretch, and I would stretch the muscle that I was training prior to weight training. So there was one day where I was in the gym, I was doing dumbbell presses, and I did my stretch prior to my dumbbell presses. I go to lift my weight, very first set, very first repetition, I press it up perfectly fine. As soon as I went to go lower it, so the eccentric contraction, it was just da, 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 and I heard a bunch of cracks in my left shoulder. And stupidly, I didn't want to drop the weight because I hate when people drop weights in gyms, so I lowered it nice and slowly. I went to go put the weights back in their proper spot. And then I went to the change room and I immediately just dropped to my knees. I was in so much pain. My shoulder was black, blue, and yellow. And that was when I tore my pec. That was back in February of 2009. Now today, I don't stretch anymore prior to my weight training because of the fact that you create micro tears in the muscle, and this could lead to injury. So if you are going to perform static stretching, it is going to be better to be performed after your workout, not before your weight training session, because after is when you really need it. Now, if you're not supposed to do static stretching prior to your weight training, what should you do? Well, things like either mobilization work, you could do dynamic stretching, which is not just holding a specific position, rather you're taking the muscle through different ranges of motion, or the best option, in my opinion, is to do the exercise that you are doing at a lower intensity, because the whole purpose of a warm-up is to prepare your body for the workout that is going to come. And by doing a exercise that you are already going to be performing and doing it at a lower intensity, that is going to be much better at preparing your body for the workout than doing something like static stretching, which is going to negatively impact your workout. Now, this is not to say that you should never do static stretching prior to weight training, but it depends on your goal. Again, if your goal is strength, speed, or power, then absolutely you would not want to do static stretching prior to your weight training. But what if your goal is to improve your function? If you are doing something like a squat and you're lacking mobility and you're not able to do the squat properly, then doing specific static stretches where you are immobile would be beneficial, because then you could increase your range of motion and do the squat properly. This is true with any specific exercise. If you're working more on form, function, or technique, then yes, you can incorporate static stretching. But if you're going to be lifting at high intensities or focusing on speed, strength, or power, it's going to be counterproductive, and the chances of your injury are going to greatly increase. Now, let's say you are trying to just improve your function of a particular movement pattern. Let's say you want to do shoulder presses and your external rotation in your shoulders, you're not able to get to 90 degrees. Well, in that case, you may want to do some work and stretch out your internal rotators. That way you're able to get into more external rotation and be able to do a shoulder press properly. But that would also be at a low intensity. If you are limited in your external rotation and you are training for strength and you're training at high intensity, then you would just not want to do that exercise. What you would do is improve your mobility, and then once your mobility is improved and you're able to do it properly, then you would start to incorporate that exercise. But if you're training for speed, strength, or power, do not do static stretching prior to weight training, because it will negatively impact your performance and it will also greatly increase your chance of injury. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.